Okay, so the Festive Fervor event is live in Warzone and Vanguard Season 1. It's going to be around for about the next 2 weeks or so, over the Christmas period, and this seasonal event has got lots of challenges involved with it, but one of the most difficult ones I think a lot of people will agree with is finding the elves. They can be really difficult to find and to destroy, so this video will hopefully make it as quick and as easy as possible to find and destroy the elves. We're going to be covering all the major spawn locations of the elves to kind of make it a lot easier for you guys to actually go and find them, and there's also a lot of misinformation with a lot of the videos people made, so I want to kind of break that down and explain properly how to destroy them, where to find them, that kind of thing. This is just a guide for finding the elves, but obviously if you need a guide for completing all of the other challenges in the season, I will have that up very soon, so feel free to go and check it out. So while I'm explaining some kind of tips and how to go about the challenge to destroy 12 elves, I will actually start showing the locations of them all. I'll show it on the map first, and then I'll show gameplay of where to find them or where I found them in my game. So while I'm explaining that, you'll start to see the locations. Feel free to just pause it or kind of make a note of the areas. So for this Festive Fervor challenge, you've got to destroy 12 elves in Warzone. Now basically what they do is they spawn in a couple of locations in each region of the map, and the actual specific building they spawn in will be the same every single time, but in terms of where specifically in the building they spawn will vary from game to game. But they've only got about sort of 4 or 5 set spawn points, and so if you go there a couple of times, even if you don't successfully destroy the elf every single time, you'll get a rough idea of where the spawn points are in that building. And like I say, there's only a few buildings in each region, at least there's a few buildings. Some will have more, some will have less, but I'll show you the main ones. What you want to do is sort of go to a specific area each time. I'll explain in a minute which specific area. Go there, go into the building, try and find it, and do this in plunder. Don't do it in battle royale because obviously you might die and you haven't got any good weapons. So do it in plunder, and obviously you have to vary it based on where the flight path is, because lots of people drop along that flight path region, and obviously if you're trying to go to an area where there's lots of people dropping, you're more likely to die. More people are likely to kind of shoot it or destroy it or wreck the challenge. So try and go somewhere a little bit more quiet. But I'm going to talk about some of the best locations depending on the flight path obviously, but I'm going to talk about some best locations that you should go to and kind of how to go about the map. You can get lots of them done every time. It should only take you a few games if you follow my strategy. So that's kind of where to go. We'll talk about specifically just now, and then we'll talk about the tips to actually finding the elves in these buildings, because it can be quite difficult, and like I say, a lot of people kind of have spread some misinformation about it. So what you need to do in the game is you need to destroy 12 elves, and how you actually destroy an elf is you shoot it once, and then it will despawn, and then it will respawn, then you shoot it a second time, and then it will despawn again, and it will respawn, and then you shoot it a third time. So once you shoot the same elf 3 times, it will die, it will be destroyed, and that elf for that area has been sort of completed, and that'll be one of your 12. That you've then got to repeat the process 11 more times. It's best to do this towards the start of the game, because each elf can only be activated once, and then if either you kill it, then it's successful, great, or if someone else does it, then obviously you can't come and do it because it will only be around once per game. Or if you try and do it but you don't successfully find it all 3 times and it runs off and you get stunned to indicate that you kind of failed the challenge, then you'll have to go somewhere else or restart the game. So you only get 1 chance per specific building in each region per game, but there's lots of buildings, so you've got lots of luck. But like I say, try and do it at the start, because if someone else does the challenge or that shoots the elf or whatever, you can't do it, and so if you get to it towards the end of the game, there's no chance because people would have already done it. So obviously keep trying, but I recommend trying to do them at the start of the game, and you want to try and stay away from areas where it's really, really popular. So the specific regions I think are best are ones down south. So the power plant area is amazing. It's literally got 3 different buildings with elves in them right next to each other. So you've got the KRNX, the radio station basically. There's the station itself, and then there's a building next to it, which is more like an office building. So you've got the recording studio, the office building next to it, and then next to that there's a diner, and that's literally within walking distance of each other. So you've got 3 buildings right there with 3 different elves. So that will get you 3 points towards the challenge out of 12 if you can successfully do all 3. And again, I'll explain in a minute some of the tips. So I'd always recommend trying to drop there because it's got 3 spawn points, and you know, even if one gets destroyed or you fail one or someone else tries to do one, you've got a good chance at getting at least 1 or 2 of the other ones. So definitely always I recommend trying to drop there. Or what I'd recommend doing, sort of rotating around the map in order. So instead of jumping from point to point, just kind of travel around the map towards the edge of the map in an order. So I recommend you start a power plant depending on the flight path, and then you can either go left up towards Airfield or you can go right towards Capital. In my opinion, I prefer to go right towards Capital, because once you go to Capital there's a theatre, like a movie theatre / cinema, and that's normally quite an easy one as well. Again, you'll have to kind of learn the layout of these spawn points. There's about 4 or 5 spawn points in each building, and like I say, the spawn points for each elf varies each game, but there's only about 4 or 5 set spawn points, and they can only spawn between those. So it's not like they'll randomly spawn anywhere every time. It's only about 4 or 5, and so once you've learnt it by going there a few times, you'll know exactly what you're looking for. And obviously if you know a building really well, obviously always try and go for that one if it's easier. But I'm going to show you the spawn locations of the elves in my games. Obviously they might be slightly different for you because it's different each time, but there's only a set number, so you're bound to have an overlap with some of the ones I had. So I recommend you start a power plant, do the 3 I'm showing you, then go to Capital and do the one at the cinema or theatre, whatever you want to call it. But just bear in mind with the one in the theatre, there's one normally at the front, there's one hanging in the light shade, in the lampshade, and then there's one on a ventilation right near the roof, and then one just below that on a shelf, and then one round the corner on the other side. So there's about 5 locations that I know for cinema. So once you've done that one, you can then move round to resort, and resort has got this big grand resort building. I'll show you what it looks like, and you want to go to the sort of northern side of it. Once you go there, there's a back entrance to a bar, and there'll normally be a few spawn points around there. Bear in mind that one of them can actually be outside. There's a little outside bar next to it, so it can sometimes spawn there, it can sometimes spawn behind the bar in the region I've said go in, or if you go through to the next room, it can be on the stage behind the drum set, or if you go through that room to the main entrance, it's hanging off a lampshade, I think, in the reception area. So those are the main spawn points I know for resort. The good thing about these is they're pretty much right next to each other, so I recommend sort of traveling between them with a fast vehicle like an ATV or helicopter or something like that. Just keep going between them. Power plant, finish those 3, go to Capital, try and finish that one, go to resort, try and finish that one. Obviously you're not going to be able to do all of them because some people will start doing their own ones, so mess things up. But once you've done that, go to resort, and then after that there's one at Sub Pen. There's a little building just outside Sub Pen, a little house, and normally it's hanging on the banister or upstairs under the desk. The problem for me was that under the desk it was actually a little bit glitched, and I had to throw some C4 because I couldn't shoot it. It had like an invisible barrier and I couldn't destroy it. One thing I would say is that some of these will be a little bit glitched. I've been to a few where you start shooting the first one and then nothing happens. The next one doesn't spawn. So sometimes that will happen. If it does, just don't give up, just go to another area. So that's the Sub Pen one. Then you can go up to Beachhead. There's one in the bunker near the beach. I'll show you, I think, the furthest one north. There's several locations around there. And there's also, around Beachhead, there's also another living quarters building, and there's also a sort of lookout tower a little bit further up in the Beachhead area, and that will have elves in it as well. I didn't come across any in Runway, but I'm sure there will be a location, but again, I wouldn't go there. It's not very useful. It's not great. There's also one in Peak, obviously. If you go to the center of the mountain, there's normally a few underneath. If you go down the middle of the volcano where you can drop down, there's normally one in there, and there'll be a few around there. So that can be an okay one, but obviously it's quite a popular area, and several times I went there, the elves were a bit glitched, so I kind of ignored that area. Docks is another great one. If you go to the main warehouse building, there'll be one. Normally I always find it hanging off the side of a crate or scaffolding or something like that. It's the main one next to the crane, basically. So if you go to that docks warehouse building, there'll be one there, and there's also one in Arsenal. It's the sort of furthest building back towards the sea in the middle. I'll show you where it is on the map. I'll show you these all obviously one by one. I'll start showing them while I'm trying to explain the tips. So I'd kind of recommend going in around the edge of the map like that in a clockwise or anti-clockwise manner. It doesn't really matter, but those are kind of the good ones. Then next at Ruins, there's normally one in a couple of tents, and I'll show you where that will be. There are a few at Village, but I didn't get too much luck with that, so I kind of avoided it because it's a bit more spread out. And there's also one in one of the main buildings at Mines, so I'll show you where that is. Obviously I've said about Peak. There is one in one of the bigger buildings at Fields, and there's one in the main building at Airfield, and also one in the Airfield hangar as well. So those are not all like every single elf location on the map, but those are kind of the major ones I found and the most useful. I'd recommend sort of going around in that order, so like Power Plant, Capital, Resort, Sub Pen, Beachhead, Docks, and then possibly Arsenal, Mines, Peak, Ruins, Lagoon, Airfield, that kind of manner, because if you go around like that, it makes it easier to go from area to area rather than jumping from point to point. It's more difficult. So those are kind of the main locations, and obviously pick and choose which ones you want depending on the game, depending on the flight path, that kind of thing. Now let's quickly talk about some tips for actually finding these elves and how to go about it without failing the challenge, because it can actually be really difficult, and I know a lot of people have been struggling with this. So the first thing is, like I say, you've got to destroy an elf by shooting it 3 times in that specific building. Now like I say, the elf can spawn, it will always spawn in all of these places I've mentioned. It will always spawn there unless someone has come along and obviously done the challenge for you or messed it up so you can't do it. But assuming that no one messed with any of these elves, they would always be there every single game. You only get 1 chance per game, and if you fail it or you complete it, you can't redo it again. The spawn point within each area of each region of the map will vary each time, but as long as you go to the building, it will be somewhere in that building. And what you need to do is obviously listen out for the laughter. A lot of people will say that, listen out for the laughter, and it kind of sounds like the elf is being tickled. It's like uncontrollable laughter, that kind of thing. It's very distinctive, so you'll know it as soon as you hear it, which is useful. But what I would say is that as well as the laughter, there's a couple of other things you need to listen out for which no one has mentioned, and so I kind of wanted to do this video to kind of cover that. So the first thing is that, so once you shoot the first elf, it will despawn. And then when it despawns, you'll hear like a jingly bell sound, so that indicates it's despawned. Then when it respawns back for the second time, because remember you've got to shoot it 3 times to destroy it, when it comes back the second time, so when it respawns again, it will make a jingly bell sound to indicate it's come back. So it makes a sound when it leaves and despawns, it makes a sound when it spawns back somewhere else in that building again, and obviously that bell sound will indicate whereabouts in the room or in the building it is. So you want to start going towards, is it left, right, up, down, so start going towards that jingly bell sound, and then you'll start hearing it laugh after it's spawned in, so kind of listen out for that. The other thing as well is that these elves release a bit of colourful smoke, it's normally like red or green, and it releases some coloured confetti as well, that kind of is being like literally released from the elf. So those things help to visually identify where this elf is. So sometimes you might be standing near it and not actually see it's there because it's well hidden. They normally hide in corners, on shelves, like I've seen it between a bookshelf and a wall in a very thin little corner, or sometimes hanging onto lampshades. They're really, really sneaky, but as soon as you know what they look like, this sort of red and green outfit, it's kind of easy to kind of find them. And like I say, they only got about 4 or 5 spawn points, so you can keep, as long as you keep going to a certain area a few times, you'll get the hang of it and then you'll know where to look. Obviously look out for this smoke and this confetti, and obviously listening out for the laughter to kind of help you find whereabouts in the building it is. But as well as that, I noticed quite a lot that because of the way the game is, if an elf is sort of standing right against a wall, and let's say you're standing on the other side of that wall, you'll actually see the confetti and smoke start to come through the wall. So it gives you an idea that, they're on the other side of that wall, and then look around the corner and they might be hiding in a corner between a bookshelf and a wall or something like that. Alternatively, I've also seen the smoke and confetti come through the floor or through the ceiling. So if it's coming, let's say, through the ceiling, then you know that it's on the floor above you, and therefore you need to go upstairs. So definitely make note of that, because that was never said. I didn't realise that until I figured that out for myself. And once I knew that, it made it much, much easier to find these elves, because you haven't got long. As soon as you kill the first elf, you'll start hearing the ticking noise, and it's only got about 10-15 seconds, and then it will despawn. You know you'll fail it if suddenly the ticking stops, the elf makes a laughing noise, your screen gets smoked and you get stunned, and then it sounds like the elves run away and it's stopped. That means you failed the challenge and you need to go to a different area or restart the match again. So you haven't got long, so sometimes it's really difficult to find out where the elf is coming from, and that's because you can hear really well on the sort of XY axis, basically whereabouts on the floor. Is it sort of forward, left, back, right, whatever. You can hear really well where they're coming from in that direction, but in terms of the height, in terms of are they below you, in the same room as you, or above you, this game seems to make it sound, to me, it's really difficult to identify where the noise is actually coming from. So I'm perfect to know whereabouts in the building it is, but not in terms of how high it is. Is it on the first floor, second floor? It makes it a bit more difficult. So just bear that in mind, that they might not actually be on the floor you're on, even if it sounds like it is. I think it's to do with the way the sound's being coded. Definitely obviously wear earphones and turn the sound right up. And I'd also recommend, if there's any noise in the area, so for example, if there's any loot crates that need to be opened, open those all first before starting the elf challenge, because otherwise you'll hear that noise in the background, that droning noise from the loot crates, and that kind of makes it more difficult to actually identify where the elf laughter is coming from. So trying to get rid of that background noise first is really useful, and then you can start the challenge to kind of more easily hear where they're coming from. So open the crates, have earphones in, put the sound up, and turn any music or anything down in the game just to make it easier to actually hear the elf sounds. Listen out for their laughter, listen out for the jingly bells when they despawn and respawn, look for the smoke, look for the confetti, and like I say, they've only got about 4 or 5 spawn points, so once you've done it a few times, you'll pick up where those points are, and you've just got to look for those points. It can be difficult to run between them because you've only got like about 10 or 15 seconds, you haven't got long, but you don't have to get them all. You can fail some of them. As long as you get 12, you'll be fine, and that can be done easily in a few games by following this method. So I definitely recommend going around the map in that order. Feel free to pause at any point in this video and use any of these locations to help you find the elves. Hope you found this video useful. Also feel free to check out my Festive Fervor challenge guide, so all of the challenges for Warzone and Vanguard. This is just sort of the elf specific video because I know it's one of the difficult challenges, but if you need help with any of the other challenges, feel free to check out my guide for that to unlock the OL TIMEY Blueprint. And if you found this video useful, be sure to leave a like on the video, it really helps me out. But also feel free to subscribe with your post notifications turned on by clicking the bell icon to stay up to date with all my Vanguard and Warzone videos. I've made lots of videos recently on how to level up your battle pass in Warzone or Vanguard, or how to level up your weapons really fast in Vanguard and Warzone, and I make tons of other guides, so feel free to check them out, camo guides and everything. Like I say, I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, feel free to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys all on the next one.